Hey everybody, Zee Garcia here, and welcome back to another rapid fire roundup in which I'm going to be covering 8 games briefly and tell you what I think of each of these. These are all games that have been reviewed by other folks at the Dice Tower. I got to play them as well, and so I figured I would tell you what I think of them. We're going to go through these from the lowest rated one for me to the one I like the most, okay, to the highest rated one. I'll be briefly telling you a little bit about how the game operates, and I'm going to give you a score, in my opinion, what I would rate that game. So, let's go ahead and jump right into it with the first one, and that is Rulebenders, which I rate a 2 out of 10. This is a horrid game. It is incredibly random. It's a gorgeously produced game, unfortunately, because, well, it's even more disappointing when that's the case. But the gameplay itself is just chaos through and through. In it, you are supposed to be manipulating these parameters that sound interesting in theory. Your hand size is denoted by a changing threshold. I might have a larger hand size if I manipulate this up, smaller hand size if it gets manipulated down. What I get to play my cards with changes. How I draw cards changes. All of these things are able to be modified. And then you put the cards on top of that come from various sort of anachronistic spheres or genres, and they are so overpowered and chaotic. Switch places with someone, skip turns, all the usual suspects of take that garbage that has been around forever. This game was a huge miss for me, one that I was very excited about when I saw the box, when I saw the production, but the gameplay is just really one of the worst games I've played in a long time. So that is Rulebenders. Next up, I'm taking a look at Bandada here, which I rate a 5 out of 10. It's average. This is a little card game for 2 players or solitaire, in which it's a bird-themed game. It has dice in there, and you're trying to manipulate these dice, sort of a communal set of dice, to justify or turn on specific scoring conditions on some of these birds you've drafted, some of these cards you've got in front of you. It's cute. It's very light and slight. It's a game that I don't think it's going to make a long-lasting impression. A little puzzly, which is nice, but it just didn't seem like it stuck around in my mind. It's not one that was interesting enough, distinct enough for me to continue thinking about it once the plays of it were done. I felt unimpressed, I suppose, is the best way to do it, as in it did not make an impression on me. I think it's a very pretty game, and it's a nice production. Very small, compact, nicely put together, lovely artwork. It's just that the gameplay didn't really bring anything new to the table for me. Next up, Sniper Elite, which I'm rating a 6 out of 10. This one is one of those hidden movement games where almost everything is merely about that. And I have a little bit of a problem with this genre. My favorite game in the genre is Fury of Dracula. And the reason I like Fury of Dracula is because it's not just about hidden movement. There are all these other systems of gears turning within gears that support that core idea. A lot of the games that tackle this genre, let's call it, lay it bare. They just do hidden movement, a couple of small things on top of that, and that's it. And therefore, I tend to find this style of game repetitive. I tend to find them very similar to every other game in its style. I think Sniper Elite has a neat theme. I think it does a couple of interesting things with this sort of bag pulling, bag building idea. But it also didn't do enough outside of the hidden movement to warrant sort of making it up my want-to-play list. I found it all right. It's enjoyable. It's well-produced. It's got some interesting things going on. But it doesn't do enough outside of that move in secret and see who finds you idea to support coming back to the table for me, I guess. So I liked it. Didn't love it, though. Sniper Elite. Next up, Fire and Stone, which I also rate a 6 out of 10. This one is very traditional in its style. It's like an old school Euro game in which you are going to be discovering tiles that you've placed on this large board, finding specific camps and fires, and getting some upgrades from the table that allow you to do things slightly more effectively. Very minor upgrades. Again, it feels kind of old school in the way that the upgrades are handled, in the way that the game looks. The whole thing just kind of feels dated right out of the box, even though it's a brand new design. And I like what's going on in it. I enjoyed my plays of it. It's kind of a breezy game. You can just sort of, half absent-mindedly engage with it and play it and have a good time. But it didn't do anything that I didn't feel I've done, a decade ago in gaming. So that was part of the problem for me. The designer here is the same designer who did Carcassonne, who's a very good designer. But usually his products tend to feel a little just caught up in the 90s, I guess, He's got that sort of sensibility of like mid-2000s down to the late 90s. And while they're fine, they're engaging and fun enough, they also just right away feel kind of dated. So that was my main issue with Fire and Stone, though I did like it. Next up, Old London Bridge, which I rate a 7 out of 10. Now this one also feels like an old school Euro game, but the simplicity, the streamlining in this one pushes it over the line for me and it sort of got out of its own way and gave me enough to think about, to do, to collect and arrange that I really enjoyed this one. You sort of have this kind of rondel idea with shifting prices, and you are lining up along, on the bridge. Basically, you are building up the bridge in a Racco style game, meaning the numbers need to continue going up, the number on these tiles you are building. You can reset sometimes, and then start from a low number again and continue going up until you reset again if you want to. Taking one of those reset turns is sort of detrimental. It doesn't further your pursuit. But I really liked it. I mean, it's a couple of tracks and some sort of pretty basic set collection kind of, but it works well. It reminds me of old school games that managed to do a lot with very little. I think generally a lot of newer Euro-style games, these efficiency puzzles, just keep throwing more and more and more things into the mix to obscure the puzzle, to lean on rules complexity for depth. And I like the old school games like Old London Bridge that manage to give you depth, give you interest without the oppression of a rules overload. I think Old London Bridge feels old school, but refreshing in a way. Next up, we've got Dead Reckoning, which I also rate a 7 out of 10. Pretty good, very anticipated game here. I thought it was a bit overwrought. We were just talking about sort of rules oppression. This one dips its toe into that realm. There's a lot going on. I think it could have benefited from maybe losing a couple of extra systems that it throws into the mix. Maybe relegate those to some expansion, some extra content. So yes, there's a lot going on, a little too much going on. I love the theme. I think the production is pretty good. There's a couple of issues with it, but generally solid. And I pretty much like what's going on. This idea of sort of deck building the cards. Every card in and of itself can be upgraded. As the designer John D. Clare, that's sort of his bread and butter. Games like Mystic Vale have done it in the past, also from the same designer. And this one, that piratey feel, everything that's going on is very engaging. Exploring islands, moving around with your ship, collecting things. But then above and beyond that, you're also then building settlements and buildings and finding specific cards in the deck that behave differently and attacking places that are attacked with a couple of changes versus when you attack somebody else, another player at the table. Just a lot of granularity there with the rules, and it bogs down a little bit for me. I enjoy it. I would play it again. I don't want to be the one to teach it, ideally, but I could sit down and play this and have a good time with it. The theme is going to carry it a lot, to be honest. I think it's a very fun world. All right. Namiji is next up. This is a sequel to Tokaido, and I rate this one an 8 out of 10. In fact, I like it a little bit better than I like Tokaido. It's a very similar idea, this idea of moving along. In this case, it's a large circle. Tokaido was from point A to point B. In this one, you move in a circle. You can move forward as far as you want to, but you cannot move backwards. If you pass something by, you need to continue moving in that direction. And then based on where you land, you will collect various things. I think Namiji has a little more game than Tokaido did. In Tokaido, every location you went to felt like a variation on set collection. In this one, you are collecting a set that if the next card always gives you one more point than the last one. In this one, you are paying coins and collecting the most coins over here. In this one, you are collecting food. You were kind of doing a lot of small micro set collection. Namiji adds some interesting things to the mix. There's a push your luck element. There's a grid element in which you are building rows and columns, and so you need to worry about geometry a little bit. It's largely the same weight. It's about the same complexity, I would say, and there is still a lot of pretty straightforward set collection. This one just felt a little more satisfying, a little richer of a game. Whereas Tokaido is almost a game designed to be played and help you relax. Namiji doesn't lose any of that, but gives me more game. And therefore, I like it a little bit better. And then lastly, Mille Fiori, which I also rate an 8 out of 10. I thought that's my favorite from these. This is a Reiner Knizia game with a bunch of different areas, some card drafting, and then playing cards for abilities in these different locations. You will play a card, you will put a token out in one of these various areas, and that area will score in some sort of way. Reiner Knizia tends to do these things with, take one idea and morph it into 5 different ways to tackle that same thing. I'm thinking modern art and things like that. Auction in 5 different ways, or however many. This one is sort of worker placement, or just placement, really, in a few different ways. So one of them requires you to build specific patterns and get points. One of them is about moving your ship forward and shipping and getting victory points. But they're all smooth. They all work well, and you don't have to do them all. You can sort of pick and choose the ones that speak to you, or the strategy that seems to be falling into place, or perhaps you're not getting any competition over here in this area, so you should target that. People are leaving you alone there, so if you put all your eggs in that basket, you're likely to be very successful. It's an enjoyable game. It's a very pretty game as well, but one that felt satisfying. Every turn you played a card, you'd get something good. It gives you that constant stream of small rewards, which just, make you feel like you are always gaining that forward momentum. I think Mille Fiori manages to do that very well in a very satisfying package that doesn't take too long to play, looks good on the table, and is a smooth, nicely ramping up package. So, good stuff. So there you go, folks. That is my rapid fire roundup. I hope that this was of interest to you. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you check out the reviews for these games on their own. If any of them sounded interesting to you, you can find them all right here on the Dice Tower. But other than that, that's going to do it. Thanks very much. My name is Zee Garcia. I'm going to see you on the next one.